A complete collapse for LSU with everything on the line. How did it happen, and where do the Tigers go from here? We're talking about it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button. And remember, the best way to help us grow is to leave your comments below. LSU loses to Alabama 42-13. Tigers now their third loss of the season. For all intents and purposes, their college football playoff hopes are done. There is a very, very unlikely scenario that could unfold, which I'll get to in a second. But we'll talk more about what the Tigers maybe have to play for over the final 3 weeks of the regular season. So we'll delve into that. So thank you for being here with us. I didn't see this coming, and I think a lot of people didn't see this coming. If you were watching ESPN's College Game Day, the entire game day crew all picked LSU. Desmond Howard, Pat McAfee, Lee Corso. The only one that didn't was Nick Saban, and he even said it's because he recruited all the guys on Alabama's team and he couldn't pick against them. Professional handicapper Lee Sterling picked LSU here on the show. Stanford Steve from College Game Day picked LSU. I picked LSU. Our whole 104.5 ESPN staff picked LSU. And there was good reason to do so. LSU is a team that had gotten better week to week. The quarter and a half against Texas A&M felt like an outlier. You had 2 weeks to prepare for this. Your defense had improved throughout the course of the season. Alabama, we had seen play 2 road conference games and lost them both. This was a virtual pick 'em. I think the line, it went off with Bama maybe a 2.5 point favorite, but this was a game that was very much within LSU's reach. Night game, Death Valley, all the vibes, all of the circumstances that surrounded this. And it was an epic failure in every way. And after a game like this, I think you have to start to have the conversation big picture about the direction of the program. A loss like this makes you examine everything you do. Now, let me be very clear. We're going to go into the game in just a second. If today you're saying fire Brian Kelly, regardless of if you think that has merit, that's not going to happen. I'll repeat this again as I have since Brian Kelly was hired. LSU gave Brian Kelly a 10-year contract, 90% of which is guaranteed, meaning you are financially bound to Brian Kelly for 10 years. I did the math before the season started because everyone always likes to have the hot seat conversation. If LSU, and I think I remember this correctly, if LSU were to fire Brian Kelly this year, they would owe him something along the lines of $68 million. There is a better chance of me waking up tomorrow and having a full head of hair than of LSU firing Brian Kelly. Okay, it's just not going to happen. So you need to punt that idea. You need to figure out, how did this happen? And what do you have to do to make sure it doesn't happen again so you can get to where your goals are? That was a thorough beating. And it's probably the most comprehensive beating LSU's gotten since Brian Kelly's only other loss in Tiger Stadium, which was the loss to Tennessee in his first year in Baton Rouge, where it was a Murphy's Law type deal. Everything that can go wrong did go wrong, from fumbling the opening kickoff all the way through the end. And you lost to a good team. The difference here is Alabama's a good team. They're not a great team. This is a team that gave up 40 in a loss to Vanderbilt. This is a team that lost to Tennessee, where they committed 15 penalties. This is a team that has really struggled to get its vertical passing game going. This is an Alabama team that was that had to survive an onside kick against South Carolina at home, a team that was in a one-score game with South Florida on their home field with 5 minutes to go. This is not a great Alabama team. I don't think what happened on Saturday night in Tiger Stadium is more of a commentary on Bama as it is on how far LSU has to go to be consistent enough to be considered a contender. That much is certain right now. And Brian Kelly and Joe Sloan and Blake Baker and every part of this entire program needs to be examined after something like that. We'll look at the game very quickly and we'll get into some big picture stuff. So LSU won the toss and deferred, something that I've been calling for all year. And they did. So, and it started great. Before Alabama snapped the football, they had a false start. It was 1st and 15. Their first play was a 1-yard run. It's 2nd and 14. You're feeling great. Jalen Milroe's pressured. He rolls right. And you lose contain, and he finds Ryan Williams for 19 yards. So now they got a first down, but no worries. First down run, no gain. Second down run, 1 yard. It's 3rd and 9. And they get a 10-yard pitch and catch on a dump off. And that was the story. On the night, Alabama was 5 for its first 5 in the first half on 3rd down. In the game, they finished 10 of 13 on 3rd down. And that was the story. Time and again, LSU had opportunities to get off the field, and time and again, the defense couldn't. So Alabama goes up 7-0. LSU gets the ball, and on the second play, Caden Durham runs 45 yards, gets you down to the 5-yard line, and you settle for a 23-yard field goal. I didn't hate the play call either. First down, they threw it to Trey Green in the back of the end zone. He was just a little out of bounds. They ran it with Josh Williams on second down when everybody was probably expecting a pass. I would have loved to have had Caden Durham in there instead of Josh Williams, but you end up with 3rd and 6. You throw an incomplete pass, and you settle for a 23-yard field goal. At least you're on the board at 7-3. Then they put together a 15-play touchdown drive. They would go up 14-3, and you're not feeling great. And the Tigers would then punt. It was a low liner. Blake Oxendorf was the punter, and it allowed a 28-yard return by Ryan Williams. So now Bama's set up in your territory. They're up 14-3, and they got the ball at your 48 here at the start of the second quarter. It's not feeling great. They converted a 3rd and 9, which was about as low as you could possibly imagine. On the first play of that drive, Jalen Milroe missed Ryan Williams deep middle. He was open. It was a touchdown. But Jalen Milroe, again, is not a good vertical passer. He is not an accurate thrower of the football. And then on 3rd and 3, they get a false start. 3rd and 8 to finish that drive. Again, he has an open receiver down the field that he misses. They're going to settle for a field goal, which they miss, but there was a delay of game. So instead, on that field goal, they end up punting. So you get the ball at your own 10-yard line. And you put together a really nice drive. And it looks like you're going to have the ball 1st and goal from the 10, but a holding on Will Campbell brings it back. Instead, you got 2nd and 20. You end up settling for a field goal. It's 14-6. And this is where the game fundamentally changed. As bad as it felt at that moment, it's 14-6, and you're still very much in this game. But you got to get a stop, and you do. You stop them on 4th and 1. 4th and 1 from your 40. And the crowd is back into it at that moment. It's a one-score game. Everything's gone badly, but it's a one-score game. You've hung in there, and now you get the big defensive stop, and now you're thinking, let's go. And on 1st down, Garrett Nussmeier fumbles. 3 plays later, they're in the end zone. It's 21-6. And I'll go back again to that moment of the fumble, because the reason you defer is for the opportunity to go back-to-back possessions, end of the first half, start of the second, and to get the extra possession in the second half. Yes, you're giving the opponent the ball first, so there's always the possibility they could go up on you first, and that happened. But look at the scenario. It's 14-6. You get the ball after that stop with 3:37 to play in the half. Go chew some clock, get some points, go to half, get the ball to start the second half, maybe take the lead, and now you've reversed the whole psychology of the game. And it's game on. Instead, fumble. Bama scores. It's 21-6. You still get the ball with 2:28. You have an opportunity here. And LSU put together one of the most unimaginable clock management positions. Nussmeier wasted 2 timeouts earlier in the half when the clock was winding down and he couldn't figure out what he wanted to do with the line of scrimmage. So you end up in a situation with a 3rd and 11. You run a check down to Caden Durham that ends up losing 6 yards on the play, and the clock winds up running out of the half, and you get nothing despite having the ball with 2.5 minutes to go in that situation, chance to go get points. You get the ball to start the second half. It's 21-6. You're not feeling great, but if you go get a touchdown here, you can make it a 1-score game, and at least you're in it. And the Tigers go right down the field. My goodness, they convert 2 4th downs. Nussmeier sneaks it on 4th and 1. They had a 4th and 4. He threw a beautiful pass to Mason Taylor to convert the 4th and 4. Kyron Lacey for 21 yards. All of a sudden, you're down to the 5-yard line. 1st and goal from the 5. And on 2nd down, Garrett Nussmeier throws an interception. And for all intents and purposes, the game was over right there. Bama would score on the next possession. They go up 28-6. You'd punt. Milroe would bust off a 72-yarder. They'd be up 35-6. And that was effectively your ball game. Both teams would have another late touchdown for the final margin, which was 42-13. But that's not how I think anyone imagined that game going. Coming into this game, out of the A&M game, there were three things that coming out of A&M, we all agreed you had to work on. You had to stop a running quarterback. You had to fix the turnovers. You had to do better on special teams. Well, let's look at how those things went. Jalen Milroe, 12 carries, 185 yards, 4 touchdowns, an average of 15.4 yards per carry. You didn't stop a running quarterback. You need to fix the turnovers. Garrett Nussmeier, a fumble and 2 interceptions. You lost the turnover battle 3-0. And then special teams, while Damian Ramos did make both of his field goal attempts, you had the low line drive punt by Blake Oxendorf that I mentioned that allowed them a 28-yard return, which set them up at midfield. The one good thing you did was Avion Thomas returned a kickoff 50 yards for your opening possession starting right at midfield. But subsequent, he kept trying to return it and only got out to the 17 and to the 18 on subsequent returns. So despite the fact that Xavier Thomas continued to try to take the ball out of the end zone, it didn't work after the first one. So the three things coming out of the Texas A&M game you felt like you needed to work on, none of those things were fixed. So if you're sitting here today insanely frustrated going, what did you do for 2 weeks? You're absolutely right to be frustrated wondering, what did you do for 2 weeks? And that's where we need to start asking big picture questions about this program after a loss like this. And we'll delve into that as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. Hey, if you want to be in that number for anything, sporting events, theater, comedy, concerts, Game Time can make it happen. Check out and download the Game Time app if you haven't done it yet. Make sure you check out Game Time Picks. That curation makes it easier to save more on sports or concerts or comedy or theater, whatever it is that you want to go see live. I love the all-in pricing. I tell you that all the time. You have to turn that feature on, but when you toggle, it'll show you your total up front, so you're not surprised with fees at checkout. That's a giant pet peeve of mine. I love the panoramic seat view for every seat on the app. And they've got the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. So I mentioned that Brian Kelly isn't going anywhere, and he's not. You need to punt that idea if that's in your brain. But I think a loss like this gives you pause and reason to step back and say, okay, where is LSU as a program? Where are they going? And what do you have to play for the remainder of this season? Well, let's look at where LSU was when Brian Kelly inherited this team. 5-5 in the COVID year, 6-7 in 2021. So they were 11-12, right, in the 2 seasons before Brian Kelly showed up. Brian Kelly comes year 1, you win 10 games, you win the SEC West, you go to the championship game, you lose, but you get to 10 wins. It's an improvement. But in that season, remember, yes, you had the great home win over Alabama in overtime, but you had the embarrassing loss to Tennessee we discussed. You had the unthinkable loss to Texas A&M. You were going to Atlanta to play for the SEC championship, and you go play a 4-7 Texas A&M team, and you decide you don't want to tackle Devon Achane. That was part of what you expect in a program in transition, where you're going to have good moments, but there's going to be those head-scratching moments as you try to develop consistency. So you go into 2022, and of course, 2023, and we know what happened. Jaden Daniels was magnificent. The defense was atrocious, and you ended up in a very similar situation where you won 9 games. Jaden wins the Heisman. You win your bowl game to get to 10. This was the season a lot of people in year 3 of Brian Kelly that people were expecting the big step up because of Kelly's history in year 3. And one of the things we talked about all summer long was, sure, but you're losing the Heisman winner, 2 first-round picks, your Broyles Award finalist offensive coordinator, and you had the worst defense in the history of the program a year ago. How much better are you? And I think you're continuing to see that. My read on where LSU is with respect to where Brian Kelly is taking this program as of now, you are undeniably in a better place than you were the day he showed up. I don't even think that's debatable. And I still think there is a long tail, high ceiling, a championship ceiling for Brian Kelly with this program. But I think what we are seeing is some very poor decisions that were made when Brian Kelly was hired that they're still trying to overcome. Here's what I mean. You didn't retain Corey Raymond. You were still rebuilding your secondary. You're getting there. And you brought Corey Raymond back. You're getting there, but you're not there. You hired Brian Polian to be your recruiting coordinator. Epic failure. To Brian Kelly's credit, he fixed it. He moved Brian Polian out of that role after 1 year. And now Frank Wilson's in that role. And he has an incredible staff, not only of coaches, but also of recruiters. And that's when you look ahead to say, okay, well, the 2025 class that you have committed right now is exceptional. You have the number 1 player in the country in Bryce Underwood. You've got the number 1 running back in Harlan Berry. You got the number 1 cornerback in DJ Pickett. You got 4 interior defensive linemen that Bo Davis is salivating over. You still got a chance to land Jakeem Stewart, one of the top defensive tackles in the country. So the cavalry's on the way. And then you look at 2026, which is a bumper crop in Louisiana, the likes of which you see about once a decade. It's certainly a 2011 class you might remember that they called themselves the Fam. It was Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and Lyle Collins, that Anthony Johnson, that great class in 2011. This is on par with that for 26. So what that tells you is your roster is probably ready to compete at a championship level in 2026 or 2027. Now, that's not going to sit well with LSU fans. And maybe this coaching staff, which are like Bo Davis, Corey Raymond, Frank Wilson, Blake Baker, these are exceptional coaches. Kevin Peoples, maybe they can accelerate it. But if you're skeptical today, you're right to be. Because losses happen. I'm not sitting here pounding the table because you lost a game. Like, you're going to lose. I mean, every team loses. Alabama's the team that just beat you today. They lost to Vanderbilt and Tennessee. And, they were on the ropes against South Carolina. And I think Bama's going to lose again this year. They're not winning a national championship. So you lose games. But it's not about that you lost. It's the manner in which you lost and the circumstances surrounding it. The fact that you had everything to play for. You had everything to play for. If you win your final 4 games, you are going to Atlanta to play for an SEC championship and a potential bye in the college football playoff. And an at-large berth is very much within grasp. You're at home. You had 2 weeks to prepare. You were embarrassed in the way the game against Texas A&M slipped through your fingers. And all of that, and that's the effort you put forward? The things that you needed to fix coming out of Texas A&M looked like you got worse. That's hard to explain. And I don't know that Brian Kelly has the answer. But we're going to find out because that's what you're playing for over the next 3 weeks. You're not playing to go to the playoff anymore. Now, I mentioned there is a scenario. This is a wildly improbable scenario. But I'll remind you, while LSU has 3 losses, they have only 2 conference losses. So there are scenarios, tiebreaker scenarios, that could unfold whereby a 2-loss SEC, at 6-2 LSU in the SEC could make it to Atlanta. And if you make it to Atlanta and win, then you're in the playoff. Now, again, this is not likely. But if Auburn beats Alabama, that's Alabama's 3rd conference loss. If Georgia beats Tennessee, well, they would hang a 2nd conference loss on Tennessee. So now Georgia, Tennessee, LSU would all have 2 conference losses along with Ole Miss, and you have a head-to-head against Ole Miss. If Texas A&M beats Texas, then Texas would have a 2nd conference loss, and you would really, really, really like to see Mississippi State beat Ole Miss, taking a 3rd conference loss on Ole Miss. But if those things happened, then LSU could very well win a tiebreaker and end up in Atlanta playing for the SEC championship against 1 loss, Texas A&M. But I'd like to see that rematch. Now, again, I'm not sure that any of those are probable. I don't know. I don't believe Auburn's going to beat Bama. I don't know that A&M is going to beat Texas. I don't believe Mississippi State's going to beat Ole Miss. I think Georgia can beat Tennessee in Athens, but we'll see how that all goes. So there is that scenario. Don't bank on it. Realistically, what you're playing for is to finish strong. And if you win your next 3 games, you're a 9-3 football team going to a respectable bowl game, not the old New Year's Six that are now part of the playoff, but a respectable bowl game with a chance to get to 10 wins again. And then that would be back-to-back 10-win seasons. But I think more than even just being able to say or throw out that you won 10 games, because you play so many now, what does that really even mean? I think more than anything, it's to show that you're going to try. And look, I know that sounds terrible because you're going to say, well, they're on scholarship and they get NIL, and of course they should try. The bottom line is, look around college football. This is the point in the season where guys start to opt out. When their playoff hopes are dashed, that's when guys typically opt out to start getting ready for the NFL so as not to risk injury any further. Now, LSU doesn't have a bunch of those guys that would be opt-out risks, but it's that part of the season. Now, it was a little later when you were talking about a 4-team playoff, but now it's a 12-team playoff. So, do you go out on Saturday and pick yourself up after getting your behind kicked and your playoff dreams taken away from you and go to Gainesville against a 3rd-string quarterback and beat a bad Florida team? Because you should. And if you do that, can you come home and beat Vanderbilt, which got housed today in its own building by South Carolina? Because you should. And if you do that, can you wrap up Thanksgiving weekend with a win over Oklahoma? An Oklahoma team that is really still struggling to find itself offensively. An Oklahoma team that's pretty good defensively, but is certainly not a great offensive football team as they're jockeying back and forth with a couple of freshman quarterbacks. They lost, again, at Missouri, 30-23. So you should win your next 3 games. And I understand LSU is a flawed football team. But you should beat Florida in Gainesville, and you should beat Vanderbilt and Missouri in Tiger Stadium. If you do that, you finish strong, you get to 9-3, and you've had something to build on toward next year going into your bowl game, and you get a lot of young guys experience. But it'll tell you a lot about your team. the heart, the effort, and if Brian Kelly has their attention, because you certainly would have thought you'd have seen a better effort on Saturday night against Alabama than you did. Well, now that all your goals are taken away, who shows up next Saturday in Gainesville? Because you're going to go face a wounded Florida team. Their coach has got the dreaded vote of confidence, but now they've got back-to-back losses against Georgia and Texas, where they just got walloped by Texas, and they got Ole Miss next week. So you should go to Gainesville and handle business if the LSU team that plays sound defense and protects the football shows up, the one that had showed up that got LSU in a position where they'd won 6 games in a row. But if the team that decides they don't want to tackle and turns the ball over too much shows up in Gainesville, you could absolutely lose that game next week. So that's what we're keeping an eye on. That's not the answer you want. It's not the answer anybody wants. A lot of people had high expectations for this team, probably unrealistic expectations, considering what we talked about. All you lost and how bad your defense was a year ago. What we learned Saturday in Tiger Stadium is that you're not ready to be a contender. You're better than you were the day Brian Kelly took over, but you're not a contender. The next 3 weeks will tell you if you're still making steps and making progress toward becoming a contender again. See how they do. And we'll be here every step of the way. Okay, that'll do it for us on this episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for being here. If you're on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And please drop your comments below as well. Until next time, it is Locked On LSU, your team every day.